How many of you like networking? Get like 3 people to raise their hand. So when I think about networking, I think about it as having conversations. It happens in line at Starbucks. It, of course, happens at events like this. It happens at conferences. It happens on the subway. So I'd like to demystify networking a little bit to have it be just like you're talking with a friend, although that person may be someone that you don't know yet. And when you think about it in those terms, I think it helps make the whole experience a bit more casual and a bit more approachable and not quite so nervous like as most people think about it. The other thing I want to stress, so how many of you are actively looking for jobs right now? Okay, awesome. So if you're actively looking for jobs, I think networking can be really important because for those of you that are looking for jobs, how many think you want to do everything? Like you look at job descriptions and they all seem really cool and exciting and everything you look at is attractive. A few people probably. How many of you know maybe 5 or 6 things you want to do and now you're trying to find people that do those roles to then think about the actual fit? And how many of you are in the I know what I want to be? It's a matter of finding people, because depending upon where you are here, I think networking can really help you define what it is you want to do, and it can really help in that career path. And we'll probably talk more about this in the professional development series about how to leverage this when you're looking. So in terms of the talk for the next about 45 minutes or so, I want to talk about a few things. One is how to make a good first impression. Some tips on in-person networking, like how do you navigate conversations? How do you perhaps exit conversations if you need to? I want to focus a little bit on email networking and etiquette, online networking, and then ways to follow up. Because a lot of times people say, well, I've met these great individuals, but how do you keep the conversation going so that way you can keep in touch with these folks that you've met? And if you've got questions or thoughts as I'm going through some of these, feel free to kind of raise your hand, interject. We can make this interactive. And we'll have time for questions at the end as well. So the first thing is, how many of you have a good elevator pitch or know what a good elevator pitch is? This is something that I think, and I won't call on anyone if you raise your hand, just in case you're wondering. This is really, really important in terms of trying to make a very good first impression. And when you think about your elevator pitch, think about something that kind of highlights your background succinctly and helps you stand out. For example, I talk to a lot of scientists and they, are used to talking to their scientific friends and they forget that the rest of the world doesn't actually know what they know and what they understand. So I was talking with a postdoc and a few of the examples I have here are postdoctoral examples. And I asked her, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm a postdoc. She was at University of Minnesota. I'm a postdoc at University of Minnesota, studying the role of different cell types in VNH with emphasis on certain proteins. Does anyone know what this means? Every once in a while, someone in the audience is like, I actually study that. And she thought she was being very clear because she knows what this is and all of her friends know what this is, but everyone else has no idea. So we helped her kind of rephrase this. And so we rephrased it as I'm a postdoc, I'm studying kidney disease, I'm trying to find therapeutics as a strategy to help in this disease. So even people that aren't technical know kidneys are pretty important. And so they might be interested to learn about what you're actually working on. So for those of you that have elevator pitches or descriptions of yourself, similar to this example, try to think about the bigger picture impact of why are you studying what you're studying or why are you doing what you're doing, to then let people get a better sense of how they might be able to interact with you in that capacity. I also like to think about these being 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds long. The goal is, if you say something like this to me, I might then ask questions about it. Well, why kidney disease? Or why did you go to the University of Minnesota? Or why are you looking at therapeutic strategies? Are you working on industry collaborations? Are you working on team projects? And so a short pitch like this lets people ask a lot of questions versus the 10-minute long diatribe of everything you've ever done. By the time you're done with that 10-minute long elevator pitch, the person you're speaking with probably has forgotten your first name because you've given them way too much information to actually look at. So that's one point I want to make sure I stress, and we'll practice this in the networking portion. The other thing I want to stress is for those of you that are looking for new opportunities, it could be nice to tag on to the end of that short elevator pitch, perhaps what you're looking for. And if any of you are PhDs or postdocs, at some point you will be moving on. You can't be a postdoc or PhD forever. And so there's an expectation that, you will be looking. And so it's definitely fine to say, I'll be finishing up in, say, May, looking for a research role in a small biotech or in a certain location. And that way it helps the person you're speaking with have a bit of a sense of what they could help you with. Because if someone said this to me, I might be thinking about, well, who do I know in San Fran or Boston that does kidney work? Or who do I know that might know someone that does work? Or who do I know in small biotechs itself that might be able to be helpful for that person to network with? So the goal here is to really empower the person that you're speaking with, to give them information to help them help you in terms of the process. And I should also mention that we'll share the slides too, because we have a lot of things that we'll go over. So I always want to mention that. The other thing I want to stress is all of you have great things to offer, whether it's technical knowledge or communication information or passion for a certain area. So don't think that you don't have anything to offer. Even some of the folks here in the audience that are in school, you may have things to offer like information about latest techniques or your Nature publication that's coming out. Someone may want to read that you're meeting with. And so don't think about it as you just always getting information from people that you're speaking with. And be really careful again about the kind of the verbal diarrhea, the kind of 10-minute long diatribe of everything you've done. It gives people can only take so much information at a time. So that 10 to 20, maybe 30 seconds of information is a good number to think about when you're answering questions or responding to inquiries. But I do want to stress the pitches that I just gave are extremely general, right? If you are going to be in a meeting of people in your discipline, say you're a neuroscience researcher and you're at the Alzheimer's meeting, it's definitely fine to be a bit more specific. Maybe not as specific as that first overview or first description, but you could think about a few levels of elevator pitches that you can tailor to different types of audiences. And it takes time to actually develop these. So it's sometimes nice to start thinking about how would you describe yourself and then refine that over a couple of weeks or a couple months to really hone in how are you pitching your background. I want to give some advice about preparing for different events, because this will tie into some of the advice about the opening lines and the things that a lot of people really get stressed out by when they're at networking events. So the first thing is, if you're fortunate enough to have information about the organization and about the people that might be there, then you already have a nice sense of some opening lines or some information that may be exchanged during the course of the meeting. For example, in this group, there's a lot of people here that are Spanish. And so as a starting point, you can talk about your hometown or about the food or about the drinks or the partying or whatever, but it, lends some commonality in terms of the interaction. Depending upon what kind of event you're looking at, if it's a happy hour, kind of a loose social engagement, or a panel discussion, something like this where there's a networking and then an agenda and then more networking. I think sometimes these types of events are easier for people if they're more introverted or more shy versus the kind of free-for-all happy hour where, it makes it challenging to even know who to go up to or, how to start conversations. And if you do have the opportunity, research some of the panel members or board members that might be there, because you can, as part of your opening line, maybe mention the same university you went to or the same town you're from or something in common, which will help definitely open up that relationship with people. I always like to have business cards. How many of you have business cards with you? Awesome. So maybe next time we have this meeting, everyone will have them. There's some nice sources like Vistaprint where you can even get cards for discounted or even free, but it's nice to have something to hand to people. I also like to bring a pen with me. Some of you may notice when I take your card, I might actually write something on the back of it so I can remember what the conversation was. I'll usually put the date, the event, and then a note or two about what we talked about, because that way when I go home and I've got 20 or 30 cards, I can remember exactly what we actually discussed. I also, as a logistical thing, I like to have my name tag on the right side of my body. So when you actually shake someone's hand, they have to look at your name tag. And I actually like having business cards in my name tag. So I can just pull it out quickly and give it to someone, as opposed to going through my purse or bag or coat pocket or whatever. So find whatever works well for you in terms of things, but try to make it easy to access cards if you do have them with you. I also think it's helpful to set goals for events. And this goes back to, a lot of you are probably pretty driven and pretty goal-oriented, or you wouldn't be where you are now. And so think about events like this. It's kind of a game, right? You want to meet two people who you don't know, and then you can leave. If you're nervous and if you just, get anxious, then set that goal. And if you've met two people, you can leave. If that took you 10 minutes or an hour, that's okay. You hit the goal that you established. Maybe you'll find out that you actually enjoy talking with people, and then you'll end up staying longer and maybe meet 10 people there. Or maybe you want to learn about 3 different organizations that are going to be at the event, or reconnect with people, or meet a specific person. But I think setting goals definitely helps people feel a little bit more comfortable in this type of setting. Let's talk about navigating conversations. How many of you get nervous opening up a conversation? I do also. People don't believe that, but I actually get nervous sometimes when I'm networking, especially when I'm networking in new groups, when I don't know people that are going to be there. And so even I sometimes struggle with this. You're not the only person that gets nervous. Everyone gets nervous, even the accomplished networkers. So I like to take the first move. I like to make the first introduction. It's kind of like when I was in class, I would always try to ask the first question. Otherwise, if I didn't ask the first question, I'd always be kind of getting nervous and stressing out and thinking about what I'm going to actually ask. But if you just do it first, you've done it. And then it's going to make it easier the entire way through. So just remember that everyone gets nervous. And so you're not the only one, even though you might feel like the only one. The second thing I want to stress is when people think about networking, oftentimes, and if I ask people why they don't like networking, they'll say, well, it's kind of salesy and it's sleazy and it's something you only do if you need something. I'd like to dispel those myths, because I think networking is about being genuine and authentic. I like meeting people. I like learning about their backgrounds. I like seeing about ways I can help them. And so I think of networking as relationship building, not as something I only do if I need something from someone. So hopefully all of you can think about it in those terms, which may help also in terms of the building of relationships. I like to also ask open-ended questions as opposed to the yes, no, like, are you cold? Yes. Okay, well, you can't really go from there too much. But if you ask someone, how was your day? And they might talk about what they did or what they worked on or other things. And so when you're thinking about questions to ask, try to find ones where there's not a strict yes, no answer, because that can be a really tough way to move on, from that. I also think, going back to the elevator pitch, clearly articulating what you're looking for, and that way it helps people help you. And just try to be straightforward, try to be very open. I know certain cultures sometimes aren't so forward about what they're looking for, but in the context of at least networking here, I think being as open is helpful, because it helps empower the person that you're speaking with. And then we'll talk a little bit more about follow-up. I have a few suggestions about how do you keep the relationship going, so that way you can maintain and nurture that interaction. So when possible, I like arriving early to events for a few reasons. I want to find out where the bathroom is, where the drinks are, where the panel's going to happen. I want to put my bag down at a seat, so that way I feel like I have a place to be. And then I can potentially be of help to someone when they come in and say, where's the bathroom? And I'll already know where it is, because I kind of scattered out the area. So that sometimes makes me feel comfortable when I'm actually at an event. We talked about being friendly. So if you're at an event and you're kind of standing and you look unapproachable, people may not come up to you. And so pay attention to how you look and how you're presenting yourself, because that'll make a difference. And if you're not sure how you are, stand in front of a mirror and practice like you would be at an event, and you may be surprised or not surprised by the impression that you're giving, because that definitely can make a difference. We talked about the name tags on the right side of the body because it helps reinforce when you're shaking hands. They can see your name again. If you don't put business cards here, then I advise, one pocket is your cards, one pocket is someone else's, so that way you're not giving other people's cards to people that you've just met. Suddenly you go home and you only have your cards in your pocket and, wonder who are the people that I actually met with. And then again, have a pen so that way you can write on the back of the card things that you talked about if you want to be able to follow up, so that way you don't forget. The handshake can be quite important in terms of just also making a first impression. Christina, you want to come up and practice a handshake with me? Christina, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice. It should be kind of firm, kind of like, it shouldn't be like this or kind of limp, where you kind of, don't really want to touch someone. If your hand gets sweaty, sometimes you could like wipe it on the side and then shake, so that way you're not giving someone this, wetty, soaked palm of a hand. Thank you. But practice this. It sounds really silly, but sometimes it makes a good impression if things are solid on this end. In terms of entering conversations, I want to spend a few minutes with some advice about how to enter a conversation. So I'm definitely probably a little more forward than most in this regard. So I love when there's name tags like all of you have on there. So I'll just go up to someone and say, Christina, nice to meet you. And she'll go, how do you know my name? And I'm like, it's on your name tag. So it's a nice way to just start the conversation. I'm Lauren, nice to meet you. What do you do? Or why are you here? Or have you been to one of these events before? Asking questions to kind of get them speaking. If you ask something like, have you been to one of these events before? And they might say, well, I came to the, opening event. We had all that great ham and it was really nice. And then you start talking more about different things. And suddenly you find yourself in a conversation because you asked a question that led into something else. If you have a name tag that also has an affiliation, like someone's company, I sometimes just like to ask, I'll be like, hello, Christina, what do you do at Boston University? And then you can start talking about what you're working on. Getting people to talk about themselves helps a lot, even in terms of you crafting your elevator pitch. Then you'll have a little bit of a better sense of how deep to go in terms of information and what their commonality might be in terms of your background. I might ask things like if you've been paying attention to, the Wall Street Journal or Boston Business Journal or other sorts of news feeds in your area of interest. Maybe you heard about a company getting acquired or having some good news. That might also be something to bring up because it'll show that you're current with what's happening in the space. Or if you really want to see if they, try to build some sort of commonality, if you saw someone that works at a company that maybe your friend just got a job at, you could be forward and say, my friend John works in the drug metabolism department. Do you happen to know him? And then you start to build a relationship because perhaps they do. And then you start talking about something, around that individual. So there's various ways to think about opening up dialogue and getting people talking about themselves. Does anyone here in the audience have other good opening lines they use, or maybe ones that haven't been that effective? We can come back to that. If you're at an event where there's perhaps a membership as part of the event, sometimes I'll see organizations have different color name tags for members versus non-members. This can be a gold mine of information. So for example, if you were at one of these events and if you saw that they did have different name tags for members and non-members, if you saw someone that was a member, a question you could ask might be, how long have you been a member of this group? Or maybe you're looking to meet someone in medical affairs or communications or intellectual property. And if someone's a member of the group, in theory, they should know people in the organization. So you could even ask the person that you're speaking with, I'm looking to meet someone in intellectual property because I'm curious to learn about that as a career path. Do you know anyone here that has that background? And they might actually know because they're, in theory, involved in the organization itself. So use some of that to your advantage when you think about strategically asking some of the opening lines. How not to open a conversation. So especially if you are in transition, or if you are a PhD or postdoc, again, you're not going to be a eternal PhD or postdoc. You will move on at some point. Try not to be so forward, like, I only came here to get a job, or here's my resume, take it right now. You can always follow up in an email with that information, but most people will get the sense that if you start describing your background and what you're looking for, that perhaps they may be able to help you find something, but don't come out and be so blunt about the job searching side of things. People genuinely want to help, and so it's all about kind of navigating that conversation. How to exit a conversation. How many of you have been in a conversation for a lot longer than you've wanted? So I don't say this to be rude. I say this more to enable discussions with people at events. So a few suggestions I have. First off, when you're at an event with food and drinks, I tend to not fill up my coffee glass or wine glass to the top, because then I always have the excuse, my glass is empty, I'm gonna get another one. Would you like one also? And that's usually a natural transition out of a conversation. They might say, yes, I'd like one too, so you go back to the bar or wherever the food and drinks are. But inevitably, I'll find someone else or they'll find someone else, and then you kind of exit that conversation. So if you are someone that likes to go to events and kind of load up on 7 days worth of food in a plate, you won't have that excuse of, I don't have any food left, I want to get more. So be really careful on how you strategically think about food at events. In other cases, I might be so forward as to say, it was really nice talking with you. I'd like to give you my business card so we can follow up. I'm going to see if I know anyone else before the panel starts. I think most people, when they're at networking events, they're here to meet some people and to make new relationships. So if you are having a really good conversation, it's definitely okay to end it, exchange cards, follow up, and that way you let them talk with other people and you also get to meet with other people. Most people should respect that. And if they don't, maybe they're having a bad day, so you can't take it personal. You have no idea what someone's day was like before they actually came in to a certain event. So if you do try to be nice to someone and they don't seem to want to talk, I always say, well, thanks for talking for a little bit. I'm going to go find someone else. And it's okay. You don't have to worry so much about that. So any other questions on this, or any situations that have happened that you want to talk through? Yes. Yeah, so the question was around, if someone comes up to a conversation and they start off with a joke and maybe you didn't understand it or didn't hear it clearly, I might switch the conversation and see it. Like, if, for example, if they had a name tag, I might just say, oh, Jane, what do you do? And kind of switch it and have them talk about themselves. So that way you take off the fact that you had no idea what they just said to you, but you focus back on learning a little bit more about them. I think that could be an okay strategy in that context. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so I think, there are definitely some telltale signs that someone is maybe getting anxious to exit the conversation or kind of want to move on. Like, if you're talking with someone and they're not making eye contact and they're just kind of looking all over to see if they can spot anyone else besides you that are right in front of them, that might be a sign that maybe it's time to say, thanks for your time. I enjoyed speaking with you. I'm going to see if I can find someone else to talk with. There are going to be cases where you may interact with people and they just seem very short with you or may not follow up. So I might always extend my card and say, here's my information if you'd like to stay in touch. And they can then decide if they want to give me theirs as well. And again, I won't take offense if they don't have a card or don't give me one. it's their loss. No, I'm just kidding on that end. But a lot of these things you just can't take personal. So it's a matter of finding those folks that you get along with and that have some commonality. So, other questions? Yes. Yeah, great question. So we'll talk in a second about kind of how do you interrupt people, or how do you think about that, because that's also an important strategy in terms of things. And I'll give you an example of what I do, that you'll see me do it a lot when I'm at different places. I also want to stress, when I think about going to some of these events and finding ways to meet people, I think about standing near popular areas like the food, the coffee, the drinks, the dessert. People are coming up all the time to get new things. So worst case, if you could think of nothing else to say, you could say something like, I'm so happy there's coffee here. It's been a very long day. How was yours? And then you're suddenly in a conversation because you're talking about coffee, and maybe you make a great friend from that. So I like using food and drinks as a advocate, I guess, in my strategy. Okay. In terms of keeping track of people as well, there are a lot of tools out there. There's things like Salesforce, where you can it's for a minimal amount of money per year. You can have a database. It's like Excel on steroids, where you can keep track of people and email history and all sorts of things, which can be nice depending upon what you're looking for. There's also, iPhone apps, there's Outlook, there's Access, there's just Word documents and Excel sheets. But keeping track of the people that you've interacted with will help you be able to, one, see that you've made a lot of progress and met a lot of great people, and two, it'll give you opportunities to actually keep in touch with those folks. So I guess, okay, so to address the question of, how do you kind of interrupt people, or how do you if you want to talk to someone and they're talking to someone, and how does that work? So there's a few things that I like to do. So one is, and it goes back to the comment I made earlier about, if you see someone kind of looking around and kind of scouring the audience to see if they might know someone else, even if they're in a conversation, that might be an indication that they're looking to perhaps have another conversation with someone. So if I see someone kind of scanning a lot, I might go up and introduce myself, even if they're with two people, and just say, do you mind if I join the conversation? And usually one of the two people may exit, talk to someone else, and then I'm talking with one of those two people that might be there. If I know the person that I'm looking to interact with and they're talking with someone else, and if they are not engrossed in a conversation where they're trying to solve world peace or some really important thing, if they're not like totally entranced in each other, I will go up to the person and say, John, nice to see you. I don't want to interrupt, but I just wanted to say hi. And usually that leads into, oh, that's okay, Lauren. Why don't you join the conversation? So sometimes I will use that. I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to say hi, to kind of interrupt without being rude, even though it lets them talk with me. So you perhaps could try that in terms of strategy to actually talk with people. And the third thing I'll do, if people are really engrossed in conversation, I'll perhaps try to stand kind of near them, but talk with people. So as soon as that person is done with that conversation, I can then go over to that individual and, say whatever I wanted to do with them. But sometimes it takes a little bit of a strategy in terms of navigating those areas. In terms of email follow-up, after you've met with someone and had a conversation with someone, in a perfect world, it's great to follow up within 1 to 3 days of the event. So that way you're fresh in their head. They remember you when you write to them. I want to stress, when you send the email to someone or the LinkedIn email to someone, don't just use hello or no subject line or nice to meet you. That's way too broad. For a lot of people that you may be interacting with, they might get a couple hundred emails a day. And so if they see something with, no subject line or just a random hello subject line, they won't know if it's spam or something important. So I suggest being much more focused, like follow up from the Spanish networking event on March 17th or 16th. And that way, if someone met you here, they will open the email because there's something in common. So I definitely want to stress, be very descriptive in the subject line and also within the email itself. You can say, just wanted to follow up. It was great talking with you about trends in, European partnerships. I look forward to keeping in touch. So that way they, again, remember the conversation that they've had with you. I also think it's helpful to put your phone number and email address in the actual email that you send, especially if any of you are actually looking for jobs right now. Your phone number and email should be in every single email that you send. So that way, if someone sees the email and they want to call you about a job, they have your information right there. Or if they want to forward your email to someone else who might know of something, sometimes when they forward the email, your actual email address doesn't always forward. So if you have your email address in your email, they'll be able to get it and someone will be able to follow up. So it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when I have an email and I try to follow up with someone and I can't find their phone number or email address. So I just want to stress that. The other thing is thinking about the email and LinkedIn invites. Again, be specific, like I was with my sister here, where I said, subject follow up from a certain event. Nice to talk with you. This goes a long way. If any of you are sending out a bunch of LinkedIn invites and people are not responding, if you're just using the general, nice, please join me on LinkedIn, and if you have no picture, the person may not know that that was you they had that great conversation with. So you want to be really careful about this. The other thing I want to stress for all of you as you start networking and meeting people and building relationships, it's really helpful to have a nice LinkedIn profile. It doesn't have to be super detailed, like an entire novel in terms of your history, but at least having a nice picture, having perhaps a summary of your background, having details underneath each of your roles. So that way, if someone had a great conversation with you and they went to look you up on LinkedIn, now they can have a better sense of what you're doing and perhaps where you're going, versus a friend of mine who has a great background, but you'd never know it because he has nothing on his LinkedIn profile to even give a sense, except that he does some marketing in oncology, but that could be anything really. And so empower the people that you're interacting with to know a bit more about what you're actually working on. How many of you have nice LinkedIn profiles with nice pictures? Excellent. That may be a good opportunity for a workshop. All right, a few tips on finding ways to follow up, because I think this is important to keep that relationship going over time. So the first thing is, for those of you that are thinking about what's next and trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, and that could be students, that could be professionals, all of us really are probably always thinking about what's next. I mean, it's a lie when anyone says, I knew what I wanted to be when I was 5, and I'm still doing that now when I'm, 55. Everyone's always in a career exploration phase. So informational interviewing is one of the best ways to follow up. If you've met someone great at an event or in an interaction, send them a note. The subject line could be, follow up from this networking event, informational interview request. And then in the subject of your email, you could write something like, I enjoyed meeting you at this certain event, and we discussed oncology drug development trends. I'm writing to see if you have 15 to 30 minutes for an informational interview. I'm looking to learn more about certain things like research roles. Give them a little bit of a sense of who you are, like a one-sentence description of your elevator pitch. A little bit about perhaps what you're going to be done, so that way it gives them a sense of timing. And then I think it's also helpful to attach your resume or CV to an informational interview request, and that way the person that you're asking advice from can see a bit more about what your background is. Everything here in purple underline can be easily customized for your particular background, but this is a nice way to keep in touch, and people like to feel useful. So if you approach someone and say, your job sounds so cool, I want to learn more about it, you'll probably get their time, and you'll probably get more time than 15 minutes. They'll probably give you an hour because you'll be talking about their background and how they got into the role, and they might be really inspired by that conversation also. How many of you have done informational interviewing or reached out to people in this context? Awesome. Yes. Great question. So the question was, what are the chances of getting a job after an informational interview? I do want to stress that informational interviews are not job interviews. They're your time to ask questions and learn about a certain path. But a lot of people I know have been approached a few weeks, a few months later by the person they spoke with that are either hiring at their firm or maybe a friend of theirs is hiring, and they'll remember that conversation. They'll reach out to you and they'll say, hey, we had this great conversation back in April. I know of a company hiring. Would you mind if I passed your information along? So I would say conservatively, 40 to 50% of informational interviews may lead to a follow-on discussion and or a potential opportunity for a job. You may not get the job from everyone, but it'll lead to opportunities that you were not aware of before. So it's really important to put yourself out there, and you'll learn a lot in the process also. Yes. Yeah, so the question was around what's the kind of policy on starting emails. I think it's okay to have, so I'm a little bit more informal, but I like calling people by their first name, whether they're a doctor or whatever. I'll just say, hello, Lisa, or hi, Lisa, or dear Lisa. What I don't like is dear sir / madam, or to whom it may concern, like you're writing to me, so you know what my name is. So I think it's okay to say just hello or hi, or holla or hola, or dear their first name. Yep. It's a side note too. It's the same thing like with cover letters when you apply to jobs. It's okay to put dear hiring manager. You don't have to put to whom it may concern or dear sir / madam or other things that I've seen people do. Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah, okay, so the question was around CV versus resume and how do you tailor and highlight? That's a loaded question, and it's actually, we're gonna do a follow-up session at some point about that. I'll talk with you offline, but it is important to make sure that you're highlighting your information in a way that they can understand and not being so succinct like most CVs are with no information about what you've worked on except the papers, publications, and things like that. So we'll follow up on that. All right. A few other ways to keep in touch. So if you're paying attention to different news feeds for your industry of interest or looking at things like Xconomy for startup companies or Wall Street Journal, if I see something of relevance to a friend of mine that works at a company, I might forward them the newsletter and say, oh, congratulations on the funding that your company just received, or congratulations on that commercial launch of that drug, or whatever it might be. Of course, that person didn't do that themselves, but it's a nice way to kind of keep in touch and have them remember you because you're kind of thinking of them. You might not get a response to that note, but it's just another way to keep in touch without always asking for something from someone. The other thing I like to do is if I'm going to go to a certain meeting that happens once a year or twice a year, I'll try to keep track of who I met with the year before and email them a month or two before and ask, are you going to be at the AACR conference or the SFN meeting? It was great to see you last year. I'd love to see if you can have coffee with me and catch up. And so use these meetings to your advantage to be able to keep in touch with people over and over and over again. Even if you have 5 minutes with them, it's still a nice way to build that relationship. When you're at conferences or meetings or big events that you go to, I love spending time at poster sessions, of course, in the exhibit hall, workshops, the alumni events, to be able to keep in touch with people and start seeing some of the same people year over year. And it's amazing over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you can meet hundreds of people just by being strategic and spending time at some of these places. If I'm interested in a certain company, as an example, a lot of companies are putting information about speaking engagements or other things that are happening around town. So this is a friend of mine's company, GNS Healthcare here in Cambridge. They have a listing of events that they do and speak at. And so I might find a way to be in the audience and go to the healthcare summit or something else that's happening around town. to kind of show interest in the company and maybe meet someone there. And if you have met someone before that's going to be speaking, that might be another way to keep in touch, to be in the audience. And after the panel is done, just go up and say, hi, great job in the panel. We'd love to keep in touch. Invite people to get involved. So if you've had a great interaction with someone, bring them in to be a speaker or a panel member here or at your university or company or other activity that you're involved in. People love to feel like they have good content to give and feel like they're thought leaders in their space, and they'll be honored. Even if they can't do it, they'll be honored that you reached out to get them involved. I like to also get involved in organizations. So for me, when I have the opportunity, I like to work the registration desk at events, and people will say, well, why do you like to do that? It's because I get to meet every single person at the event. You get to check them in and give them their name tag. It's wonderful. And so I also find that sometimes if people get nervous or anxious at events, having something to do at the event is a really nice calming feature. So think about that. Next time you're going to be somewhere, maybe you can try to volunteer or help, and that way it gives you something to do and it helps give you a place to feel kind of comfortable. But I fight over with people sometimes about the registration desk, so keep that in mind. And lastly, I think about this in terms of relationships are built over time. I mean, there are people that I met, I've been in the industry now about 15 years, and there are people that I met, back in 2000 that I still keep in touch with and have built wonderful relationships with. So when you start thinking about this, I have a lot of friends that will say once a week, have coffee with someone new. Or once a month, we'll have coffee with someone new, whatever works in terms of your schedule. But you start doing that and you start building, 10, 20, 30, 50 new people a year. And then you get their connections and their insight and knowledge. And that can be really powerful if you think about the large effect that may have.
So you can
yes.
have one coffee here, which is that, right?
Exactly. Now, I'll try to get them to go to events, and that way I'll purposely see people. So it's a nice way to keep in touch. Cool. And then I also want to stress that, networking isn't just about, finding jobs and just about, finding something that you need now. But again, we talked about a little bit, this can lead to a lot of career awareness. If you're in the academic world, this can lead to grants and collaborations, leadership opportunities. Networking can lead to a lot of things besides just conversations with folks. And so think about that. It can be a really nice way to just enhance your activity and enhance your involvement in the area. So with that, here's my contact details. We've got maybe a little bit of time for questions, and then we've got networking so we can practice some of the things that we've talked about here. Cool. Any other questions, thoughts, things I didn't cover that you're looking for? How about in the back? Yeah.
One thing that I tend to do is say things like, I'm just going to go get another pastry or whatever, and I'll be right back, and then I never come back. And so is that something that people sort of expect, or should I really sort of work on changing that?
Yeah, so I would probably suggest changing that. So a lot of times people like to add on to something that they're saying. I would just say, listen, I'm hungry, I'm gonna get a pastry. It was great talking with you. So instead of saying, I'll be right back, just say, it was great talking with you. And that way it lets you off the hook. And then you don't feel obligated to come back into the conversation. Yes.
At what point to leave someone alone? Like, how many emails is too much?
Oh, good question. How many emails is too much? Okay, so my philosophy is I'll follow up. So, okay, if I met someone at an event, I'll follow up maybe 2 days later with a nice note that was tailored for the event. If I haven't heard back, so if I was asking for something like an informational interview, I would follow up a week later, because you never know, maybe that person got on a plane the day after the meeting and is in Europe for a week and has not been checking emails. So I'll follow up a week later. If I still haven't heard back, I may follow up one more time, but that's it. So I wouldn't suggest following up every day. I've had people do this sometimes, and it's like, I will get to it when I can get to it, but 3 times would be a good number. If they haven't gotten back, then who knows? Maybe your email got lost. Maybe their admin checks their emails. Sometimes if you're emailing people that are really senior, they do have a filter. They have an admin that will filter out emails, so they might not even actually have ever seen your email. It's hard to know sometimes if that happens. But and again, don't take it personal. If someone hasn't gotten back, maybe that day you emailed them, they got 600 emails and it's just lost in there unread. But okay. So if they don't reply, should you call them? So if you had a great conversation and if they said, please follow up with me, I'd like to keep in touch, I think it could be okay to call and just remind them of the conversation but I would only do that in selected situations. Like if they actually did say, I'd like to keep in touch, please follow up with me. If they haven't said that, then maybe I'd look to see if they're at another event that you might be at in a few months' time and reconnect and just reintroduce yourself and start from there.
So when you are engaging, like speaking to someone that is your exactly peer, kind of like another grad student, another postdoc, that is kind of easy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you try to introduce yourself to someone that is a PI or is like in a higher position, sometimes how do you do that without, you have like probably there like you want to introduce yourself because you have like an ulterior motive. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think, and so this may be where a lot of difference between Europe and US in terms of approach, or at least this is my feeling about this. So you may think it's awkward to introduce yourself to the head of the department or some senior person in industry, but they might be thrilled to have you come up and actually say hi to them because they want to learn what's happening in the lab now or what's happening in the new areas of research. So I wouldn't think about it as them being senior and you not being senior, or them being too important and you're not important. You have a lot of things to offer them in terms of your research or knowledge or insight about the area. So I'd approach them like you're approaching a friend of yours. Maybe be a little bit more formal in terms of how you talk with them as opposed to a peer. But I wouldn't think so much about them, feeling uncomfortable or having an issue with you going up. They'll probably be thrilled because most people don't do that. And so they'll think this is great. Here's a postdoc that has enough kind of courage to come up and talk to me. That might leave a really good impression. Mm-hmm.
What if you are trying to kind of sell a product and are trying to get people to notice it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a turn off for a conversation with that?
Good question. So in terms of if you're kind of selling something, or if you have, if you're trying to get some perhaps insight in terms of a product that you have. So it's a little bit tough depending upon the person you're speaking with. If they are the purchasing manager for the group, or if they're the head of the group that knows exactly what you do, then I think it could be okay to dive into a little more detail about what you're working on. If it's someone a little bit tangential to the area, I might suggest that would be a great time to talk briefly about what you do, give them your card, ask for theirs, and then tell them that you'll send them more information and you can follow up after. Because it's hard sometimes in certain networking events to have a really detailed, really thorough conversation about products or services, because they may be distracted by other things going on, or even other people that might be there. So I would suggest let's follow up, because the key would be you want to have their info so you can follow up. And so then use that time to say, it was great to meet you at this event. Let's get a coffee next week and talk more. So, having spent about 10 years in business development for different companies, I know a lot about that particular question. So, other questions or thoughts? Yes.
Do you have any other tips for motivation? Because I think that we all can see for that coffee that you mentioned earlier, you cannot keep in touch with all of it. So how do you strategy?
Yeah, so the question was around cultivation. So, okay, a few things I found really helpful is to get involved with certain organizations that you might have a common passion for. So, for example, I've been involved for the last couple of years with the Association for Women in Science, with AWIS. And so it's been a wonderful way for me to build relationships with both junior people, like current students and postdocs, and more senior people in industry that all have that common passion for empowering women scientists. So they have events perhaps once a month. I'll try to go to at least 4 or 5 a year. And so that's a great way to see people, 60 to 70 people at a time at each of those events. So getting involved in certain organizations like that. I've also tried to do things like co-write articles with people that I want to keep in touch with, or co-present with people that I want to keep in touch with. So finding ways to get them involved in your work if possible, or get involved in initiatives that are interesting to you, that can help also increase the ability to connect with people in a more personal type of way. You can't do that with everyone, of course, because then you'll be overextended, but there may be certain situations where that could happen. So, cool. Yes.
So after your first follow-up email, so like in maybe several months, what are you using to keep in touch, like really?
Well, so sometimes I'll use if I know I'm going to be at an event that I met them with before, I'll contact them and see if they might be there. I also, if I've read a paper of relevance or seen something of relevance to the person, I might then just email them out of the blue and say, hey, I read this article in Nature. I think it's relevant to your work. I just wanted to make sure you saw it. And so it's a nice way to keep in touch without always asking for things from someone. So those would be 2 strategies that I'd probably try to employ. Some people I know send out a yearly update. I don't know if any of you do this, but a yearly update email, like, dear friends, it's been a great 2014. I've done this and this and this and this and this and this. And, would love to hear how you're doing. And so that can be a nice way to maybe, again, they might read that and think, oh, wow, I haven't talked with her in a while. Let me reconnect. So that could be a strategy. So, cool. Maybe time for 1 or 2 more questions. Cool. Or if no more questions, we can have networking and food. Cool.
Everyone is welcome to stay to the reception because you have to practice everything you learned tonight, right?